every day when you're in trial or you're at a hearing and you're not working on your skills, you don't feel nearly as sharp and you don't feel nearly as confident and competent in what you're doing. So instead of preparing the night before, I would show up and sit second chair and I'd realize, okay, I maybe should have prepared more. Well, I don't really know the objections as I should know them right now, which then would lead me to stress out about being or feeling incompetent, having that imposter syndrome that we've talked about before.
Medicine,
law, friendship. This is Dr. Long and Lawyer Nik. You're listening to the Medico-Legal Brief.
one doctor, one lawyer, and a whole lot of gray area. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for following us here on the Medico-Legal Brief. We've got me, Dr. Long, and Lawyer Nik. This is an episode where I'm excited to talk to Lawyer Nik about his reasons for leaving law. Obviously, I went through an episode where I talked about why I hated family medicine versus loved family medicine. I want to give the opportunity for Lawyer Nik to defend his choice in leaving the law and to talk about it here on a podcast.
Yeah, it's kind of insane over the years how many questions I've received, how many odd looks I've gotten. The fact that even though I am not practicing, my license is still up to date and I help out at the law school. There's so many different dynamics here, but I'm excited to have this conversation. It's going to be a very, very fun conversation.
What blows my mind, and probably the majority of people, when you think of attorney, when you think of lawyer, that's that end goal. A lot of students, a lot of kids growing up, that's their ultimate goal, is to become a lawyer. And you obtained it. Then you decided it wasn't for you and you pivoted. Bring us along that journey. Where did you decide that law was not the right fit for you? And how many years into practice did you decide that?
I've talked about this in one of our very first podcasts where we were just introducing ourselves to our viewers and our listeners and giving a background on our resume and where we've been and what we've done. Originally went to law school to join the FBI. I wanted to be a special agent. That was my end goal. At the time, in order to be a special agent, you needed several different things. You either needed to be a CPA, be an accountant. You needed to be a lawyer and have your JD. You need to be fluent in a foreign language or bilingual or trilingual, or you had to have some insane STEM skill that could be really utilized. And I always felt like law was a very interesting topic. And going into law school, I had the notion of, all right, well, you know what? I like law and I like the arguing and the research and the thinking through a problem and being analytical. If I don't make it into the FBI, then going back and being a lawyer may not be a bad idea. Conceptually, that was my argument I made to myself as to why I would go into law school and pursue that, as opposed to pursuing one of the other avenues into the FBI. But I really wanted to go the law school route and have that under my belt.
Do you feel like because law school was a stepping stone, that was not your ultimate goal? When it came time to make a decision whether you were going to step away from it, it made it easier for you because it wasn't truly your goal anyways at the end of the day?
Yes, it really did. Because the passion that somebody has for a career, the passion that you have for the job that you're doing is really, really important. You should be happy with what you're doing. Going through law school and then being a lawyer, it was always just means to an end. Because even while I was working as an attorney, I was still pursuing the FBI. I was trying to get the years of experience under my belt. I was trying to build my resume. I was always working to attain that special agent position. Ultimately deciding to close the book on that and then leaving the law, it was a lot more freeing than I think what a lot of people would go through if they were to ultimately leave the law. But throughout law school, throughout my time in practice, I obviously had pressure and stress because type A, I want to do a good job and I have high work ethic and high work drive. But there was also the notion of, I just got to go through these motions to accomplish the goal for the means to the end, which then made things a little bit easier because during law school, while others were focusing on trying to get into the top 10 or they were trying to score every interview with every big firm, I was able to be a little bit more lax about it and find opportunities for experience, not necessarily opportunities to set myself up at a big law firm getting paid. At that time, I think the going rate was like $160,000 a year out of law school.
So you don't feel like the paycheck could even keep you in the legal world?
Funny that you mentioned that because before I actually left my firm, I was offered the paycheck and I was offered several things that would have put me on par with a lot of my peers at that time. I turned it down in pursuit of what my ultimate goal was, which was government service.
Tell me more. Obviously, you didn't become an FBI agent like you wanted to. So, what was this other role that you stepped into and left law for? Was that also supposed to be another stepping stone into the FBI? Was it supposed to be another resume builder for you?
It was out of law school, interned with a family law attorney here in Fort Worth. And she's absolutely brilliant, a brilliant mentor, an amazing person, a very, very good friend. I worked for her and I was very honest about what I wanted to achieve. She was open and receptive to it. And we had a gentleman's agreement that when the time came for me to hopefully go to the FBI, I could leave the firm, but there would always kind of be an open door if I chose to come back. I definitely leveraged that. Left the firm I was at twice. First time I left because I had actually made it fairly far into the FBI interview. It was looking like there was a chance of me possibly being selected. Ultimately, I wasn't selected. But during that time, she came to me and said, "Hey, I need a replacement for you because if you leave, I still need an associate." So we actually interviewed the new associates together. We selected one and we all worked together for a little bit. And I kind of passed that torch over to the next associate. And during the time I left, while I was interviewing, I did some contract work on the side with her where I would sit second chair at trial or I'd help out with discovery. And I drove Uber. So it was kind of wild that during the time that I was trying to make a living, I'm an Uber driver. I'm in the interview process for the FBI. I'm a licensed attorney, but I'm an Uber driver. It was weird when I'd get into conversations with passengers and they'd ask me, "What else do you do?" And I'd explain that. I got some looks that were kind of like, "You're full of shit." And of course, I didn't tell anybody about the FBI, but I was, "Yeah, I'm a licensed attorney," and the looks were just like, "You're lying to me." So I did that over the course of I think 3 years. Ultimately, I got turned down by the FBI, and the feedback, trying to read between the lines, was, "Hey, you need more life experience. You need more work experience." At the time, I was 26, and so wanted to go back out and get it. I returned to the firm, and I did that for about another year. And then I got unhappy. And ultimately, that's why I left because I was unhappy with what I was doing. A little bit after that, I had to look for another job. I knew I wanted to look for something that would give me a second go at the FBI. That's where I found myself in aerospace. I ended up working at an aerospace company here in Fort Worth, Lockheed Martin. And I ended up working there for about 8 years. And during the time and my experience working for Lockheed, determined that the FBI probably wasn't for me as I grew in my life and I grew in my salary and I grew in my benefits, as well as trying to settle down. Made the ultimate decision that I would no longer pursue that and I would just try to embrace my current position that I was in.
Based on your story, the role or the pay, is that something that is thrown out of proportion when you're watching, obviously, a lawyer on TV? It's always the really big shots up there, making millions and billions of dollars versus the actual average lawyer doesn't jump right to that salary right away as soon as they graduate law school.
When I came out of law school, my salary was at $60,000 a year. And I knew that my peers and my colleagues that had went big law, they were making 120, 130, 140, 150, depending on where they went. I understood that. And I also knew, okay, I'm a baby lawyer. I'm at a very, very small firm. I'm this person's first associate that she's ever had. I was just happy to have a job that would allow me to pursue my dream, but also give me a place to learn and make a check. I had mentioned that I got a pretty hefty offer. When I had the conversation with my boss at the time that we knew I had a good chance at making the FBI, she sat me down and she made me a very, very, very good offer, which was twice my salary. There were some other things stipulated in there, country club membership, access to different side hustles that we could essentially do together. She was really trying to sweeten the deal. And there is also Um, it wasn't a promise, but it was an opportunity that sometime in the future, I might be able to be a partner at this firm. Very clear that my name would never be on the door, and that's fair. It was her firm, but to some extent, I could be a minority partner at this firm. And that's something a lot of lawyers want to hear. They want that path. They want that path to partnership. They want the salary that was being offered, and they want to grow at a firm that they feel like they're being taken care of. I turned all that down. Now, when I came back, I negotiated a slight increase in my salary. I knew that my skills and my experience were still new and I still need to learn. But one thing that really stood out to me was I came to know what the other associate who had replaced me was making. It was something that bugged me. It was just another data point as to why I was unhappy when I found that out, because felt like now I really need to focus on my career and I wasn't getting paid what I was worth. Looking back, I definitely was getting paid what I was worth because I'm introspective and I understand what I was putting out, the billable hours, my experience and what I was doing at mediation at court was probably worth the amount.
Any like day-to-day complaints that you had that sealed the deal in terms of like leaving law just is so much easier because I don't have to deal with this now?
You've prefaced why you're upset at family medicine with certain things. I have very similar complaints. I, for one, love the law. When you go to law school, if you don't already love the law, you learn to love the law. I love everything about the law. I'm proud to be a lawyer. I'm proud to be licensed. Like I said, I don't have my license in an inactive state. I have it in an active state to where if I ever want to go back, and I've considered going back many times, I could. It's not necessarily about being a lawyer that rubbed me the wrong way. It was more so about work life balance as a 26, 27, 28-year old, high stress situation, as well as the types of clients, the types of cases, uh, to some extent, how I was being managed at times. That kind of all blended into this perfect storm of frustration that led to me leaving and walking out the door essentially.
Do you think switching over to a different specialization would have maybe broadened your idea of what law could be and could do for you? Are there other areas of law that would have given you that work life balance that you wanted? Do you think about that at all?
I do. The situation that I was in, back to your other question, is day to day for litigators. And what litigation essentially is you're a courtroom attorney. Every day you're spending in court, every day you're dealing with clients, you're at hearings, you're at depositions, you're working on discovery. I enjoyed a lot of aspect of that, but there was a lot of stress that came with that too. One thing that really stood out to me was the fact that because I was looking at other avenues in my career, I wasn't focused solely 100% on trying to be the best trial lawyer I could be. So on weekends or at night after work, instead of searching evidence or practicing my objections or going over discovery and really diving back into how do I be a good family law attorney, I was focused on let me read books about the FBI. Let me look at geopolitics. Let me make myself well rounded for what I'm pursuing. From 9 to 5, 9 to 6, really focusing on going through the motions of being a lawyer. But after that, I wasn't doubling down on trying to be a lawyer. I was doubling down on how do I get out of being a lawyer. But that being said, every day when you're in trial or you're at a hearing and you're not working on your skills, you don't feel nearly as sharp and you don't feel nearly as confident and competent in what you're doing. Instead of preparing the night before, I would show up and sit second chair and I'd realize I maybe should have prepared more instead of doing this other thing, which then would lead me to stress out about feeling incompetent, having that imposter syndrome that we've talked about before. It was just this vicious circle. Going into the courtroom was very, very stressful. Leading up to me leaving, a few specific things occurred that I just came to the realization I don't want this lifestyle. I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. I can't do this for the rest of my life. I need to get out.
We've touched on this in a prior episode in terms of like a work-life balance and just what it means to be a lawyer. But I want you to touch on it again. What are those less glamorous sides of the law, things that you're doing outside of actual work hours that takes a toll on you? What are those things that maybe the viewers would like to hear that aren't spoken about when you're not actually in the court talking to the judge and other lawyers? Like, what are those other things that you have to do on time with your time?
When you're a trial attorney, you always have to be ready to be called in the court. That's one stressful situation. Anytime you have a case and a lawyer needs to talk to the judge, they need opposing counsel there with them. So there were numerous times, and granted, I was only an associate, I was second chair. I was pretty much a support function for all purposes of this firm as I was trying to grow into being a first chair. And for those who don't know, first chair, second chair, if you are first chair at a trial, you are the person that's essentially responsible for running that trial or running that hearing. You are the person that is responding to objections. You're the person that's calling witnesses. Second chair, your support function. You might question some witnesses. You might be able to object at times, but for the most part, you're like the co-captain to the captain, right? I was happy being in chair, but I should have been moving towards first chair. And so being able to be called into court at a moment's notice was always stressful. My biggest fear too was the fact that as a baby lawyer, you're still held to the standard of a lawyer who's been practicing for 30 or 40 years. Even though you've been out of law school for 1 year, you can still go do the things that all the other lawyers could do. So I always had this glooming stress of what happens when my boss is in court here and all of a sudden we get called to an emergency hearing on the other side of town. Well, I'm a lawyer. I need to then go. And because I wasn't prepared as well as I felt I should be, it was a looming stress because I was always worried what happens when I have to show up at court. I don't have her there, and I either do something wrong, I say something wrong, I make our client mad, I end up in contempt, I get thrown into jail, I get fined, I do something to hurt the firm. That stress was always there. And there was a few times in which that happened where maybe I got called to a hearing or I had to drive out to a courthouse and make an argument. And it was just that constant stress bubble. And that was like a big role in me wanting to leave because I hated feeling that stress every single moment I woke up.
I definitely understand that, and I think why I'm so grateful for the way medicine is. You actually get your hand held for a minimum of 3 years during residencies. You're out as a physician, but you're always working under someone, so that you get the stress, you get a feel for it, but ultimately the final decision comes from your attending physician. I can absolutely understand and relate how stressful those situations can be, and how you want to just like curl away into a ball and just be like, hey, someone else take care of it for me because I don't want to deal with it right now. But another thing that seems to coincide with just medicine in general is just that lifelong learning, right? So it sounds like you're constantly reading up on things, whether it's new law, whether it's the data that is supporting the case that you're managing. Is that something that you're constantly having to do every single day? You're coming home and you're reading more evidence, more discovery, like you said. Is that normal?
It's normal to an extent. For the most part, laws don't just change willy-nilly unless there's something like coming down from the Supreme Court. Every year, laws are voted on. So you're pretty much stuck in whatever the laws are for that year, right? Until there's a vote or until something drastically changes. And most of the time, things aren't drastically changing. It's more so trying to learn about the law in its current state and trying to learn all the other aspects of it. What people don't understand, if you haven't been to law school, is just not learning the law. You're learning the procedural aspects of things, especially if you're a trial lawyer. You need to learn what documents you can file, what pleadings you can file, how do you go about getting evidence, how do you make appropriate objections, are you doing it all within the appropriate deadline or timeline? Any one of these things could ultimately lead to you losing a trial, not getting what your client needs. And so that's a constant stress bubble of, okay, is my calendar organized? Do I have all my pleadings in line? And do I know when I need to submit a pleading? There's a very specific formula to when somebody files this, you need to file this within a certain amount of time, and then they're going to file a counter, and then you need to file this. It's a back and forth ping pong. Trying to learn the procedural aspects of that without even being in court yet was stressful. Then you have to learn the procedural aspects of being in court, which is when can you speak? When can you do an opening? When can you do a closing? Do you need a jury trial or are you going to do a bench trial? Do you need to call for a hearing? When you show up in court, when do you go? Do you object? Do you not object? What happens if your client doesn't show up? There's all these mixtures of procedural and soft skills and just constant learning that occur. You are learning for the rest of your life, and eventually you get the hang of it. But when you're a new lawyer, it's stressful.
So it sounds like the theme is choose a career that you really truly love. Otherwise, you're going to find excuses not to love it.
Yes, that's exactly right. And as far as the other things, day to day, pissed off clients. I mean, we both experienced that. You have your patients that are angry. I've had clients that have yelled at me. I've had opposing clients that have tried to fight me in parking lots, violent clients with criminal history. That's all fair. I mean, that's part of the territory. But I think that overall, the actual litigation aspect of it and me not being prepared as a trial attorney should scared me the most. And it led into the day to day of the workplace environment, and that just added more to it.
Was there anything that you regret not doing or trying, not giving it a better opportunity now that you're on the other side and haven't practiced in a while?
Hindsight's 2020, right? Like if I had known that the FBI wasn't going to pan out, I ultimately wasn't going to pursue that realm, and I embraced being a lawyer, I may have had a very, very sweet setup. I had an amazing mentor. We had an amazing firm. The sky was the limit at that point. When I was doing really good, I was getting good feedback on the things I was doing. But the work-life balance just, I think, would have eaten at me. Work-life balance eats at me a lot in these careers. And so to go back to the day-to-day environment of the firm, you would be in court or you would be in mediation, and then all of a sudden, because the owner of the firm, it's her firm, it's she says we do it, there were times in which we didn't really have as efficient procedures and processes as we should have had. So rather than getting our stuff done for trial right after work from 5 to 7 o'clock at night, it was, all right, we're all going to go take a break, and we're going to reconvene at the office at 8 o'clock. And then we're at the office from 8 o'clock to midnight. As a 26-year-old single guy, yeah, that's fine. But there were times in which I had to cancel dates, cancel hanging out with friends, cancel hanging out with family, just because I was on the owner's time. That's fair. That's what I signed up for. But like after a while, that situation wears down on you because I didn't know to negotiate PTO. I didn't know what boundaries were. I was just trying to go all in and do the best I could, but also pursue other things.
Yeah, you're painting law as a very doom and gloom kind of career choice here. So I kind of want to hear whether or not that work-life balance changes over a career lifespan. So once you get some more experience and then once you become partner, does the work-life balance improve? Are you working less or are you working more because it's now your baby? Like you're taking care of this business now. How does that look like once you've proceeded further into the career?
I never got to that checkpoint. I never got to that level of the game, but I can give at least feedback of what I've seen with friends, with my law school friends, with attorneys that I know that are still in the community. As you progress in your career, of course, we've talked about the different tracks. You could go be a partner at a firm, you could own a firm, you can go work in-house counsel. Those will all dictate your approach to work-life balance. What I saw in my boss was she was extremely smart and it was her own firm. She basically got to eat what she killed. So there was a little bit of desperation, even though she was very successful. Desperation was always there as to, hey, this could all fall through. And if anything happens and it all falls through, then what's going to happen to the firm? I remember very specifically, one point she had a medical issue. And the medical issue was kind of serious in the moment where, over the course of 24 hours, it's like, well, is this going to lead to bigger issues? And if this leads to bigger issues, how is it going to impact her livelihood? And she was the breadwinner in our house. She was the one who helped keep the lights on, not only in the firm, but put food on the table. And so I knew that there was this stress to like owning your own firm to where you had this constant understanding that if something happened to you or your firm, it could all disappear just like that. And I was very appreciative of that fact. That's part of the reason why I did try to make myself so available, because I felt to this day that she was bringing me in as almost a family member. She's looking after me. She didn't have to hire me and spend her hard-earned money paying me a salary and getting me an office and getting me office equipment and paying for my bar dues and so on and so forth. So with her, as she kept advancing, there was always the constant stress of success. I also think that as you advance in your career, the procedural aspects and the knowledge get a little bit easier. You get more confident, you get more competent. Being called to trial or being called to a hearing is absolutely nothing. You could do it in your sleep, right? And so I think you kind of exchange the stress for being a competent, intelligent, confident lawyer to, am I doing right by my clients? Am I doing right building this business? Am I doing the things that are going to give me the good Yelp reviews and give me the good word of mouth and making me a good lawyer in the community? And a lot of the times lawyers are ultimately trying to either make partner, own their firm, or be a judge. That kind of influences what you're trying to accomplish throughout your career.
Got it. Got it. Well, is there anything else you wanted to mention here to our viewers before we end this episode? Is there any other gripes or things that you can think of that really pushed you away from law and just was really off-putting for you?
At times, leadership wasn't quite there. There have been things I've done as a leader and as a manager that I don't think were the best things. There are other things where I thought I really, flourished as a leader. Having the right mentor and having the right leader and being able to trust in them fully helps the situation. Not to say that my manager was a bad, poor leader, bad, poor manager. I just think that at times, with the dynamic of the firm and not having efficient processes and procedures, things got a little muddled. If you have a firm in which things get muddled, it's hard to wake up and try to go and put efficiencies in there when everything is just chaotic to begin with. You got to find good leadership.
Yeah. I mean, as you're talking about your manager, I can relate to her stress on owning, but also managing a second person. Because in medicine, we're constantly talking about private practice, opening up your own clinic so that we can take away all of the protocols that a hospital system or an employer puts on you. But again, you get rid of one set of stressors and you just add on a new set of stressors. So I really appreciate the fact that I have the option to either go private or corporate. And like you, if I owned a practice, it would be way too stressful for me to enjoy it. And so I can absolutely relate to your boss as well as you and why you might have stepped away. That's a great place to end our conversation here on the Medico-Legal Brief with Lawyer Nik and Dr. Long. If you guys have any questions or anything else you wanted to add or want us to follow up on, please make sure you engage on our social medias. We are on Spotify, Instagram, TikTok, wherever you want to find us. But we always post a new episode on Wednesdays, 10 Central Time. See you online. Yes, we're doctors. Yes, we're lawyers. No, this podcast is not medical or legal advice. Do not take anything we say as a reason to perform your own heart surgery, represent yourself in court, or diagnose your neighbor's rash. This is for entertainment only. Think of it like hanging out with your smartest, wittiest friends, not a substitute for an actual appointment. If you act on anything we say without talking to your own professional, that's on you. Seriously, don't do that.